Hello everyone, this is Caillou, and I'm back with Pipsqueak and Dodger, and today we're going to be reviewing Riddles of Revio for MSEM. So Riddles of Revio is a set by Emily, um, where the core concept is a blue-flavored world, kind of like one centered around the iconic sphinxes, and it has a very mysterious and secrets of a destroyed world kind of flavor to it. Mechanically, it's all about modal spells, and it also has the titular riddles, which are special rarity cards, which within its limited um, seem just weird or useless at first, but have ways to solve them in conjunction with other cards in its environment. Today, though, we're going to be talking about its constructed potential. So, yeah. Do you guys have stuff you want to say before we get into the card by card?
Uh, no, I'd rather get into it, I think.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's run it. So the first card we have is a pretty popular addition to the format. It's Admonish. So it's a one and a white for a modal spell. Uh, it's either disenchant or you can counter target spell unless its controller pays one. So yeah, I think just
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We all talked at the same time.
the format I think did lose Judicial Verdict, which was one white mana type during the Crotation, and Admonish kind of neatly slips back in there to be like mono white tempo can have its day back in the sun. It's also just a really solid, flexible sideboard piece for like because Disenchant is not a bad sideboard piece on its own. And then in some matchups, you're also going to be like, they're a combo deck, and I don't really have many other tools to stop them. Maybe I bring this in.
I think
But
this is
yeah,
fun
better in the
fact.
main deck, actually.
I agree. It's a very low opportunity cost artifact enchantment removal spell to run because if you're on the play, this card is going to be able to counter something like fairly reliably. Um, and MSEM decks run a lot of artifacts and enchantments. The other thing I would note is MSEM prior to this didn't have a disenchant that was one in a white. We had some like double density with mild upside ones. We had some sorcery speed ones. We had some green naturalizes. We didn't have a disenchant. So I think this is actually a more notable inclusion than you'd think.
that's crazy. I feel like I just errated Dockyard Swindling to be an instant in my head in that case.
It might be, but it's double density.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Nope,
this
it's
is
sorry,
actually.
no, I'm getting confused. Dockyard Swindling is single density, but it is a sorcery.
I think this is actually a very annoying card. Like, not necessarily a bad way, but like, you know how force spikes are always annoying to get hit by because it's like, oh, if I just had one more mana, if I wait one more turn, to play this card. Um, and having force spikes that have ways to show up in the late game means they're much more likely to show up like as random one-ofs in main decks and stuff like that. So I feel like this is the kind of card that's gonna like get you a lot when it does show up. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
For sure.
And
Probably
there's
not in
still
GPs
certainly,
because we still have the open deck lists, but oh man.
yeah.
Leagues, I think leagues for the next month you're gonna have to be real careful with how you tap out.
I still think even in GPs, like if your opponent's running one or two of these, like it's gonna be tough to play around sometimes.
It has like the find
Especially
nothing syndrome where it's like, well, if they have it, it's really gonna suck for me, but I kind of just gotta play as though they don't have it.
kinda, yeah. But yeah, definitely. I think honestly, probably the most likely card in the set to become a format staple.
yeah, I
I don't
agree
know.
with that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Especially because it's a really simple and straightforward card that a lot of different decks can use. Whereas
yep.
I think a lot more of the powerful cards in Revio are like more build aroundy.
Yep.
mm-hmm.
All right. Next card is Collected Malice. It is our first riddle. Um, it's a sorcery speed, raise the alarm. But you can choose a second mode where if you spent 3 or more mana to cast it, you get 5/1/1s instead of two. So I guess you can like play a Thalia effect on turn two and then play this on turn three and make 5/1/1s. Doesn't seem horrible.
I'm I think I'm solidly at this doesn't seem horrible. Like the floor of it isn't great, but people have played Raise the Alarms with synergies in MSEM before, and
Yeah.
the upside of sometimes it is a, 3 mana for 5/1/1s is a better rate than you get typically in Constructed. Like 3 mana getting 3 tokens is considered a good rate. Fox Spear is a playable Thalia onto. I think that's the only playable Thalia onto,
There's
and I
also
think once you have,
Cal.
oh right, Tal. Yeah, that's fair.
I mean,
I
who
don't.
hasn't done turn 1 Hex Parasite, turn 2 Gather the Townsfolk? Clearly, that's the most busted combo you can do in canon. So.
So true. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think this card is like a fun build around. I could maybe see some weird like token decks trying to abuse this.
the main issue I think that people are going to run into is token decks typically want to run many non-creatures because the
Yeah.
the things that abuse tokens and the things that make tokens are typically non-creatures. So it's a little bit of a risk to run a bunch of non-creature tax effects in those decks, but maybe it'll be interesting.
All right. Speaking of things that make tokens.
Yeah. This next card is Destined Calamity, which is also the first of the Calamity cycle. X, white, white, instant, align X, which basically means you get X points to spend, where X is the X cost of the spell, and you can spend those across 3 different things. You can spend 1 point to create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. You can spend 2 points to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and you can spend 5 points to exile each permanent your opponent's control, return them to the battlefield return them to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of your next upkeep. So the kind of idea of this card is you can cast it to make tokens like a kind of worse version of Children of the Clouds. If you have a board state or you have a lot of mana, you can actually create a couple tokens and put +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So once you have at least 3 creatures, it's more mana efficient to put +1/+1 counters on each of them than it is to make more. And if you put 5 mana plus the 2 base, so 7 mana, it's actually a white Time Walk, which is kind of neat. I don't think this card is great because Children of the Clouds is insane, and this is directly competing with it. But that's my only real complaint about it.
So I think one thing you might consider with this card is like if you're already running a tokens deck that happens to have a lot of mana, this is a token maker that's like if you already have a large board, it has a much better mode of like buffing your board, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like Children is kind of a dead card if your board's already full because there's no point in like making more if your opponent board wipes you. Whereas this can help you like kill them at instant speed, perhaps.
I think the main awkwardness there is the token decks in the format are overwhelmingly aggro decks, and this card is very inefficient at making tokens for aggro decks. Like 4 mana
Yeah.
for 2/1/1 for a Raise the Alarm is kind of
I agree.
awful. But
I actually didn't realize that this exiles your opponent's lands until you just mentioned it.
I do wonder if there's something to be said for this in the Heart Attack build, where Children of the Clouds is one of your kill conditions. This does a similar kill condition-y thing, but also has the Time Walk mode, and 7 mana is very easily get in Heart of Zadina decks.
No, here's what you do. You cast the High Prairies Burn, turn all of their lands into tokens, and then you Destined Calamity them. And
do we have anything that's do we have anything that skips upkeeps? Oh, okay. So what you do is you Destined Calamity, and then on your upkeep, there's a trigger that goes on the stack to return all of the lands, and you Seabree Null Mage it.
That works, I think. Right?
It does.
That's disgusting.
Yeah,
does Blundering Clock Tower still do dumb stuff, or does that not work with this?
No, unfortunately. Yes, it does. You order the triggers. You use it to order the triggers. Yeah, you can do that.
Oh, lovely.
You can permanently exile your opponent's board doing that. All you need is 7 mana discard and a Blundering Clock Tower or staple effect.
Now, see, now we're playing with power. One-sided Armageddons, here we come. That actually, I feel like because Blundering Clock Tower is a land, that might be relatively real.
It's not too hard to do, to be honest.
Oh, what if we unleashed?
The
Yeah, I
the
kind of feel
other
like this shouldn't exile lands. That's just me. I like even without those abuse cases, like I'm sort of just like, wait, like
the silence and time
I don't
walk
know.
mode on this is
I,
kind
I
of
guess it's kind of a silence. Yeah, like that's kind of in pie. I don't know.
it's
Mhm.
It's weird.
it's it's definitely a bend, but given that this is a kind of blue bending set, it makes logical sense. Um, let's get on to the next card since we have a lot of things to talk about. The
Yeah.
next card is my pick of the set because I want to live in a world where this card is good enough for MSEM. It's white 3, Herald of the Suns. For an enchantment creature, Angel Sphinx, 5/5 flying prowess. If you would draw a card, scry 1, then draw instead. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if it's not their turn, draw a card. So, one, this card's obviously insane in EDH because of how it screws with anyone who's trying to, you know, play control or do anything other than tap out repeatedly at sorcery speed. Um, it's also obviously one-sided, and the fact that it's a 5/5 flyer that's frequently going to punch as a 6/6 or 7/7 means it'll kill people pretty quickly, and it smooths your draws while doing so. Um, it's a little bit awkward in the fact that, if you play this and then pass to your opponent, they can just untap and kill it, but to which I would point towards Angel of Succor, having some extra bonus fun times with this, since it means that you're never passing to your opponent with mana down. Um, I don't know. I like this card. I think it kills people in a very satisfying way, and I think it gives you some really cool card selection.
I think
But
this card's playable in the Angel Caller deck.
yeah, it is an angel. I also wonder if the enchantment card type is going to do anything here. The one other thing I would note is it's not if you draw one or more cards, scry 1, then draw that many cards. So
Yeah.
if you cast a divination, you actually scry 1, draw a card, scry 1, draw a card. Which will be a little bit annoying to actually play out, especially if someone, God forbid, is still on Lackey. But it's it's still a notable power level increase.
I think it's fine, but like I'm probably not gonna play this over Scion of Storms, I'll be real.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. ETB value is just so important, but it is a
Yeah,
sick
like
design.
I don't know. Being in a
Also,
enchantment, being an angel,
Scion does put probably more flying power in a fairly
yeah.
close amount of time, but that's way for you, you know. All
Hmm.
right, Inquisitive Student, 1 and white, 2/1 vigilance when enters battlefield. Investigate. So we already have a fairly powerful 1-drop that investigates in white, but 2-drops are particularly notable because of Theocracy decks. And there is an Esper Theocracy deck that shows up every so often that really needs more playable creatures. Every single time I see that deck, it's running 2 or 3 cards that I'm just like, really? Do you have to? And then I
Yeah,
look at the
Volta's
options, I'm like,
Toolbox is OP, okay?
no longer in the format. Got him.
It was so good it had to be removed.
um, but the fact that this is a piker with an legitimately good keyword and it replaces itself with heavy quotations around that on ETB. I don't know. I think that's like legitimately playable if you're in the deck where the artifact is relevant.
Yeah, so the comparison is always like Thraven Inspector, right? I think in a deck where you often aren't actually going to be paying like the premium of 2 mana for this, then like you are getting a 2/1 instead of a 1/2, which is a much better stat line because you're more likely to trade for value with it. Um, and vigilance is not irrelevant. So yeah, I think this card is pretty good in those decks if you're monumenting or theocracying. Like solid card, especially if you care about having red packs. All right.
Yeah, by
Next card is Lonesome Traveler. It's the first card with the Mentor mechanic in this set, and it's pretty simple. It's a Savannah Lions with Mentor. So obviously, Custom Verse really loves their Savannah Lions with Upside, as does Canon Magic now. And I think that this is a pretty good one. Whenever you introduce a Savannah Lions to MSEM, though, there's definitely going to be some pretty stiff competition. And the mentor does kind of like call into question, okay, like how exactly are you building your deck? How many like 1 power creatures do you want to include if your deck is trying to aggro your opponent down? I think that there's plenty of ways to like make it worth it, especially if you're running stuff like Mana Dorks or There's some good ones like Stock Healer or Lily Retriton that Lily Retriton actually buffs this, so like this becomes 3 power and the mentor becomes more useful. So I don't know. I think this card's like solid, could see some play, might not end up seeing much play just because there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, I think my main issue with this card, which we chatted about off recording, is I think it's just kind of hard to generate the scenarios where this does the thing you want it to do. Where specifically you play this, let's say you play this on turn 1, then you play a Lily Retreat or something on turn 2. It's not until this attacks on turn 3 alongside the Lily Retreat you're getting any value. So I would say the upside is generally pretty marginal, which isn't like a oh well it's bad, because again the floor is a 1 white for a 2/1, but you need to compare it to the other marginal upside Savannah Lights we have in the format, and there's a good chance there's one that's better for your deck. And if there isn't,
Hero is a very powerful card, for instance.
yeah.
Um,
And if there isn't, this one's fine. Good job, run it.
I think like maybe if we had like a card that was like a 1-drop with haste and 1 power that you really wanted to buff, like maybe this combo is really well with that. Like something like Fervent Champion-ish, but more powerful.
So you just give me a 0/1 haste double strike. You're welcome.
That's not terrible.
Do you mean Autumn Fae?
But you see, I don't
Wait,
think
no,
Autumn Fae.
that's flying. That doesn't have haste.
Exactly,
It's
exactly.
edge.
But I think that like I agree with all, what you've all said. I think if there's some sort of like genuine counter synergies that this can play into, I'm thinking like Avatar of the Natural with this and something else feels pretty dumb. Stuff like that.
This is pretty good in a Katie deck, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure, because you buff it and then it buffs everything else. So like your it can do like again, Avatar of the Natural is so good because it takes like selective buffs and just goes absolutely ham with them. And this can do not the same thing, but like at a lower curve, it can play in a similar space.
A similar concept.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. But yeah, so next up we have Master of Ancient Ways, which is another powerful mentor card. But here, it just grants them double strike, straight up, which is pretty strong after you've just buffed it. So it essentially gives them a 1/2 punch right there. I think being a 3-drop without any other keywords hurts it a bit, but yeah, it's one of those cards where like if you can just get there, it's quite good. But then I think being a 3-drop with no immediate impact that also doesn't have any evasive keywords makes it a bit hard to justify.
Yeah, this card gives me Silverblade Paladin vibes. I suspect it's probably about that power level. I think I'm more hopeful on Lonesome Traveler seeing MSEM play than Master of Ancient Ways personally. Because I think 3-drops has always been an awkward spot for white creatures. Just because given the nature of like the current suite of creature support we have in white, especially for aggro decks, it really heavily favors cards that cost 2 or less. And as Caillou said, this card dies to pretty much everything. You need to wait a turn to attack with it. I don't know. I suspect it doesn't line up too well. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I'm more or less in the same boat. I think you need to be a kind of mid-range deck that's willing to curve fairly high, but you also need to be interested in a creature that doesn't provide any value. It's just kill people mode.
This is pretty good to play on turn 2 off a dork though, because that means you do have a creature to attack with next turn. Especially if that dork had like 1 power, then you can go like attack for 7, right?
How much better is it than Merciful Eroda is part of the question.
I mean, 7's more than 4, quick maths.
That's true.
I mean, this will also like die to a stiff breeze, so that's different than Eroda for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's
interesting. Yeah. All right.
So the next card is Sphinx's Authority, and I'm scrolling down to where that card is. Okay, here we go. Each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, and you can cycle it for 1 mana and gain a life. So this is a Narset effect on enchantment. I actually don't know if we have a Narset already in MSEM. So
To my knowledge, we do not.
okay, so if you want to like, I don't know, if you have some kind of cheap, like if you have some kind of wheel effect, you can do the thing. If you want to, if there are some decks that are drawing way too many cards, maybe you run this like in your sideboard, and it's very low opportunity cost because cycling one you like gain a life too is honestly not a bad fail case at all. And being an enchantment is like maybe relevant for some decks. Maybe you run this in your Legend Weaving deck. I don't know. Seems fine.
I actually really like that idea. I think this in Legend Weaving is pretty hype because using it as an instant is kind of messed up. Like
Yeah. You
lashing
do.
it in response to
Yeah.
a draw spell, just like eat the draw spell.
That's fun.
I think that this is.
I don't know.
Oh, I just want to say quickly in EDH, this is probably incredibly fucked up in Lady Ashima because in canon, Commander, it's okay, sure, you can't run this in Nekazar or whatever, but like our version of Wields dot deck does include white, and naturally it basically like, and with the commander itself, it's basically like, um, at their draw step they just discard a card, so they just
Yeah.
are they constantly can never go card positive, and then you just wield them, and that's just game over. So
Yeah, in MSEM proper, um, I'm a little bit uncertain, but I'm pretty sure in one of the past reviews we commented something to the effect of if we ever get a playable Narset effect, this card gets fucked up. So if someone can check the tapes, but I'm fairly certain there's some way of like making this either breaking symmetry on an effect or otherwise abusing this.
Well, there's actually a cheap wheel effect in this set, which we'll talk about later.
Um, true.
So there you go. All right. Shall we move on?
for
Sure.
sure.
Okay, so the next card is Terra's Confluence. It is a 3 mana instant. And it's like the Confluence cycle from that one commander deck. Uh, you can choose three, and you can choose the same mode more than once. So the three modes are freeze a permanent, so it gets tapped and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. You can blink one of your creatures and it returns immediately. And you can give a creature +1/+0 and lifelink and first strike until end of turn. So these are kind of like three weird disjointed abilities that like you wouldn't really play any of them on their own. But like I think the combination of these means that you'll probably have a decent use for this card. Like if you, or at least you can build a deck where like this card is doing something good most of the time. I think the best mode is like probably that it's already kind of like a better Ghostly Flicker, right? Because you can exile up to three things instead of just two. So if you're a deck that wants Ghostly Flicker, this card's already great. Being able to lock down up to three permanents is kind of cool. And like it also wins combats for you, so lets you dodge removal spells. This card seems like fairly versatile to me, actually.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. I definitely think this is one of the better ones of these that we're getting.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think you
Yeah.
run this unless the second mode is life, though. That's what I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
I
What
think I
is?
agree. I think the main place to explore this card is in a mid-range deck, something where
Yeah.
you have high-value things to blink, but also, potentially doing a tap down is a fairly real upside.
So
Potentially getting to
wait,
push damage.
if you have an Archaeomancer, this can be like 3 mana repeatedly Frost Breath, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, kind of cool, I guess. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. The
Yeah.
I
Like, I
was
mean, this
thinking
also
about like,
is just the best Ghostly Flicker ever, and like Ghostly Flicker is not a bad card, so this
yeah, for
card
sure.
should have a home, in somewhere.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where like, if you like, I think Acrianus's command is kind of was. It's not a very similar thing, but I think that like the power of it winning combats was a real thing. So if you cared more about the
Yeah.
versatility of that card, more versatility and ability to win combats more so than the straight removal mode, then I think this is probably a straight upgrade over every deck that ran that.
I think Ocarina's Command is better in your average deck, but there are some decks where this card will be really good.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
So the next card is Trial Recruitment. This is a one. So it's part of a cycle where it's a 1 mana spell, and as an additional cost to cast it, you either pay 2 or have each opponent draw a card, and you make 2/1/1s. So it's 1 mana,
wait, didn't they
and
did they used to have first strike or am I
they used
tripping?
to have first strike. I actually pushed to nerf that because I think that them having first strike makes it kind of impossible for aggro decks to fight through it early on
Got
in the
you.
game. Yeah, you get card. It's like kind of card neutral if you eat a creature with it, but it's such a huge tempo hit, especially if the tokens retain first strike across the turns. Um, as for the actual card, like raise the alarm for 1 mana is definitely pretty powerful. If you're a token deck that can take advantage of the soldiers to kill your opponent quickly, like um, then maybe you don't care about letting them have the card. And if you have the mana, you can always just cast Raise the Alarm that costs 1 more. Um, I maybe like this is definitely a lot worse for control decks now, but it is a decent way to stop some aggro decks that have a lot of 1 toughness creatures. So maybe it still sees play as kind of like Timely Reinforcements mini version. I don't know. What do you think, Pip?
This is a card I've been very bad at evaluating. Like, even when I had First
Yeah.
Strike, I just completely missed that you'd ever be willing to do that. Maybe I'm generally very wary of inbuilt 2-for-1s because I think people can frequently miss how much giving your opponent a card cost you because it's invisible. But I I think this is a card where if there is a deck that can utilize the fact that they can cast it for 1 and just kill you before it's relevant or whatnot, then I think this card is incredibly real and people need to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, yeah. I think like it's definitely still worth keeping an eye on. I think with first strike, this card would have been like kind of ludicrous, but yeah, it's definitely still pretty good. And I like that it's good in both aggro and control decks, but kind of in different ways. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to do the next one?
Sure, I'll take it. So next up we have Young Prophet, which is adding to MSEM's unofficial Young cycle. Started with it's of course now Canon has its own Young Necromancer where they're starting their own form of the cycle, but in MSEM they're all one in a color, 2/1 creatures, which on a certain condition make a 1/1 token, usually with a keyword. Here, it's using one of the set's main batching mechanics, Cryptic. So artifacts, enchantments, and modal spells. And I think that like you definitely have like if you care about I think that like you if you care like lots of these things are just going to be like Union Rail Strikebreaker does a similar thing, except it's you can also hit all instants and sorceries. But I think that if you care about that extra power and if you don't have like that many instants or sorceries anyways, then the lifelink upside on the humans could be very real.
I think the lifelink upside is kind of huge, actually.
I also
Like,
think the second
yeah,
point of power is particularly like I don't know.
yeah.
I have definitely felt the issue with Union Rail Strikebreaker being a 1/1 in the past.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like in oftentimes Union Rail shows up in decks that are like primarily artifacts. Um, and in that case, like I think this card is just a straight up upgrade, assuming you can afford to pay the white mana cost. Um, besides that, like it's actually this is actually pretty good for Enchantress decks, which haven't really existed before, but like
Wait, what? What?
um,
Well,
as
I
far
guess.
as I can tell.
Well, okay. I guess there've been like I don't even like. What
I
do you
mean,
mean by enchantress versus just like enchantments dot deck? I guess.
Enchantress is usually more of a controlling prison style deck.
Then we've
that
had
deck,
quite a few. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but not in the past like year,
Well,
Caillou.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if don't know if Legend Weaving I would call an Enchantress deck, because usually what makes it like a deck an Enchantress deck is you run a bunch of like cards that are
Cantrippers.
similar to Argothian Enchantress, which was like the original one.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But yeah, like most of our enchantment decks are just like straight like control
mostly
decks
like
where you
yeah,
just run a bunch of enchantments, reflect on Serenity, kill them dead.
yeah. Like I wouldn't call those Enchantress decks because it doesn't really like do the creature plus enchantment combo.
Mm-hmm.
But we're getting out. We're going on a tangent a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's
Anyway,
mainly because like our enchantresses in the past have not been below 3 mana
yeah.
and or have not like had protection. So
Well,
Young Prophet being cheap
there's
and good
Crossroad
is
Bard, but I think that's the only one as well.
Crossword Buzz
So
is 3 mana, I think.
yeah,
So
exactly.
Yeah, but it does have built-in protections. That's kind of nice.
mm-hmm.
All right, we're getting off topic, but anyway, this card's pretty good. I think you'll see some play,
Yep.
and that's yeah. All right, cool.
Moving on to the next card, we have Allure of Alratha. Alratha. Blue 2, instant with affinity for artifacts, non-keyworded, and draw 2 cards. This is probably worse than Thoughtcast, but also if you have one artifact out, it feels a lot better to cast. So, like lower ceiling, which is a huge deal on affinity cards, but higher floor. I think this card is probably fringe playable. People keep playing Zulaf Offering. I think this is so much better than Zulaf Offering. It isn't even funny. So hopefully people will stop playing Zulaf Offering and start playing this.
Zulu Offering is great. What are you talking about?
Okay,
This
I
card's
think
way
you have
worse than
been
Zulu Offering.
you have been one of the few people to play decks where Zulaf Offering is a defensible card to include.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I don't think the average person who puts Zulaf Offering in their deck, like the fact that Zulaf Offering has shown up in like normal robots, where you're sacrificing sometimes board presence, that I think is a mistake versus
Yeah,
like in combo decks.
it's fair enough. Yeah, I like this card feels like in a weird spot to me because Thoughtcast is always so efficient at doing what it does in the decks that want to like vomit their hand onto the board, and the main benefit you have is that like you need fewer artifacts, and it's instant. But like those decks are traditionally not trying to play at instant speed, and they're already trying to jam a bunch of artifacts. So like this seems like a pretty big downgrade to Thoughtcast. Not that that's like a death knell because Thoughtcast is a really good card. And if you are playing a control deck that happens to generate a couple artifacts here and there, like maybe you're running Terraformer's Globe or something, then this can be 2 mana, draw 2 cards at instant speed, which is a good card in a control deck. So
I think
yeah,
I think one of the main things I'm interested in seeing this compete against is, or that I'm interested in seeing people explore as a result of this card, is people have not really explored the idea of playing Ride the Storm in fair decks, and I'm hoping this gets people to revisit that idea. But I guess that's kind of neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right. The next card is Ancient Tome. It is a 2 mana artifact. You can't cast it unless you reveal the card named Ancient Tome from anywhere in this game. It also has cycling too, unkeyworded. But once you have it in play, it has tap, draw a card, which is a powerful effect for a 2 mana artifact. So there's been a bunch of theory crafting about how to reveal it because there's already, the prophecy mechanic exists, and there's a bunch of stuff that lets you do that. Like, Seek Prophecy curves into this, so that's kind of cool. I don't know if there's like a idyllic tutor or what is it, enlightened tutor style card that lets you tutor for this and put on top of your deck or whatever. But like, if there was, that'd be a good combo. I don't know. How are we revealing this?
I wish I could say I've given it a lot of thought, but
I think there's also something people haven't talked about is like Tinker's toolsing for this. Like, I think there's probably going to be some ways of otherwise getting it onto the battlefield, and I think this is a very strong engine card if you can get it onto the battlefield. So, yeah, I don't know.
Tinker's toolsing for this is pretty good too. I agree. Especially since you can just cycle it. Like, it's as far as garnets go, this costs basically nothing to include because you can just cycle it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And, oh, you can also ILS Concord for it, I guess. Although there's probably
Oh,
better things
that's
you can do.
not by much actually. Like it depends on what your deck wants.
Yeah.
But like, well, I think
Hmm.
there's probably like planeswalkers that might be a bit better. I think that's probably like
So, like, it wouldn't be that much of a stretch for someone to say something like, "Hey, if you're an ILS Conquer deck, you should always run one Ancient Tome."
right because it's as close to free as you realistically get.
You like that's a defensible argument, I think. I don't know if it's right. It kind of depends on the deck, but like, it's pretty
Yeah,
close to being true.
yeah, I buy that.
All right. Next card is Cold Shoulder. Both a name that I'm surprised hasn't been taken yet, and effect I'm surprised hasn't been done yet. It is a cancel that investigates. That's it. And I think it's actually pretty good because dismiss is not a bad card, and getting your dismiss to cost one less mana, but have the card gated behind two more mana. Like the more important thing is making the counterspell cost less, right?
Right,
And
absolutely.
so I think like that's actually worth it to me because I'd much rather be like, okay, I'm gonna counter your spell. I 2-for-1 you, and yeah, I have to spend a little bit more mana to get the 2-for-1. But like the
You
most
get it when
important
you
thing
get it.
is like I cast my cancel. It countered your spell at a more appropriate time, and like since I'm playing a control deck, I'm probably gonna have 2 mana to throw away at the end of your turn at some
Yeah,
point. You know?
I totally agree. What I think we should do is we should ask Emily to change this to just cost blue, and then make it create a double clue where you have to pay 4 to draw the card. Because I think you just move the cost there and then it's fair. So,
I mean, honestly, I don't think that card would see play because still the Pandemonium exists.
how do I what?
Still the
Well, this
Pandemonium.
would be this is a true counterspell, which is a
Yeah, but like,
slight difference from
oh, okay.
Still
Well,
the Panda.
actually, that's
Yeah,
true.
that would be strictly better
That makes
counterspell.
more
I was like,
yeah, never mind. I'm,
what?
wait, I'm straight up trolling. I'm straight up trolling. Okay, I'm done. I'm done.
Caillou with the outplays. So where I'm at with this card is I generally hate having to register cancel in constructed, but I think as far as cancels go, this is probably one of the better ones to play. Um,
I
like,
think cancels are underrated,
yeah, that's also probably fair. I hate having to do it, and
especially in
I'm
the format like
definitely like,
MSEM. Like people play greedy shit all the time.
Really? I've been feeling more and more the opposite recently, where I think
Not
people,
recently,
yeah, because I
but
feel like
like
people have been like picking up the pace,
historically.
where I could see this being played, but it would also need to be backed up by a good suite of early interactions so that you're not like
Yeah,
left in the dust.
I
I'm
think historically there have been metas where this card would be great. I think in the current like meta where you can get aristocrats and like burned, then like this card's not good, right? So it's definitely meta dependent. But
mhm.
I don't know. I like the concept of this card a lot.
Oh yeah, like you said, both the name and the effect are stuff like where it's like, God damn, really? Like you go into Scryfall and you like type in Cold Shoulder and you're like, okay,
Yeah,
not bad. There's no counter target spell investigate? God damn.
yeah.
there is counter target spell investigate 3 times, which is a lot of times to investigate.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Shall we move on?
Yep.
Yeah,
So next up we have Consult Ancient Knowledge. This is the blue form of the card we saw previously. And here, instead of making 2/1/1s, you get to draw 2 cards. So, 1 mana divination is pretty not bad. The main thing is it worth also having your opponent draw cards so it's at card parity? So, or like not card parity, but only +1. So,
I think there's a good chance this card gets nerfed. Like,
yeah.
I need to see it to like before I'm convinced. But like, if you're a combo deck and you're just paying 1 mana to draw 2 cards, like there's a good chance your opponent never gets to use that card you just gave them.
Hmm.
Especially if you're on
and
a combo deck.
the fail case is divination, which is closer playable than any of us want to admit.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, like the fact that you can cast it for divination is like fine. Like if you're setting up, you can cast like your first copy of this on turn 3, and then next turn go off.
Yeah,
With like your other 2 copies or whatever.
Yeah, also,
Um, I
I
don't know.
remember Hersey was playing pre-Crotation, like a Turbo Fog deck, and that ran, it ran, there's a Zoltan card, which is instant, 1 blue, each player draws 2 cards. And I think
Yeah.
if there are decks where you're like, well, my sheer card quality can just like outgrow whatever cards I'm also giving them, then it's like, yeah, this suddenly becomes very dangerous. And like you said, combo decks where like tempo and card advantage just kind of go out the window.
Yeah, I've been kind of terrified of Turbo Fog ever since Alara printed that Cantrip Fog.
Moment of
I'm
peace. Yep.
kind of fundamentally against the idea of the Cantrip Fog, but
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
the
know.
main thing is just like MSEM just has so many decks these days where it's like that are not trying to win through combat damage that it's like, eh.
There's only like one I can think of, to be honest.
Real.
But whatever. It's fine. I think that this card is very scary. It's it's powerful, and I want to see what people do with it first. But yeah, definitely be on the lookout for this one.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Pip? Resident blue
Yeah,
player
I
being
mean,
real quiet.
this is not the card for the blue players like me. This is not the card for the I'm gonna 1-for-1 you into the ground players.
Mm-hmm.
This is the card for the degenerates in the audience, like Hersey.
if you
Um,
if you like this card, you will know. Like,
yeah, like this card was made with you in mind. Yes, you, the person listening to this podcast. Um, but I don't know. Otherwise, it's the card is probably going to be good at doing what it does, um, which is kind of a stupid thing to say, but I think y'all get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's very straightforward.
yeah,
I think
right.
yeah, I think it's straightforward but like what we've all been articulating, it's like we just have to see how it plays. It's really hard to theory craft like how this is gonna look until you see it in a game. But yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Next up we have Cosmic Calamity, another one of the Mythic Calamity cycle, and here the modes are, 1 point you get a Careful Study, 2 points you get Rain of Reflection. Is that it? And then
Reign
Revelation
of
Rain of
Revolution.
Revelation. That's the one. And
or
then
Sift.
or Sift. Yes, the lame old version. Um, and then for 5 you get essentially just double free cast. I think that like needing something that it itself is very powerful to cheat out with this makes it a little bit worse for me than the white one. But then the card selection on the Sift mode is it's not that bad. Like I don't know. I find it hard to evaluate this one, but I generally don't feel as high on this as I did about the white one.
I feel like the 7 mana mode, letting you cast a free spell from both your hand and your graveyard, is kind of nuts. Like, that can potentially cast you something like 16 mana worth of spells. You can also do dumb stuff like cast my Chikyu Champion plus Volcanic Pounce or something. Like,
Mm-hmm. I mean, I
I mean,
agree,
Yeah,
but those feel like a lot more Christmas landy. Like I feel like if you're playing a deck that is playing Chikyu Champion, unless you're also Epic Encountering, which then I could see like you Epic Encounter the turn before to get something dummy big and then you free cast it like in a control deck. But otherwise, I can't see them being run in the same deck. Is just how I
yeah. I
feel.
mean, I guess part of the question here is, can you put this in a heart attack deck and not feel bad about it? Like, is the
why
four
would you
mana mode of
cast?
this? Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
think so. Because like, why don't you just cast the card that wins you the game for some reason?
the main answer is because the version that people keep on insisting on playing is the one that doesn't actually win the game when they cast their X spell. Like the Bant Heart Attack deck is the one that's been played
Oh,
repeatedly recently.
right. Yeah. So I think what this does for me is like, if you're playing a deck that wants a Mind Spring, like this is the best Mind Spring ever because um not at low values, but even like for 4 mana, like this is just sorcery speed sift, right? Which is like you
Yeah,
can cast the card, that's
yeah.
fine.
You don't feel really awful about that. You just kind of say, okay,
Yeah,
well, that's the spell I cast.
and then like if you ever hit 7 mana, sometimes you just cast 2 enormous spells.
The
Like
game
I don't
ends.
know. Yeah, like
Yeah,
if you're playing a ramp deck that naturally has, I don't know. I'm just imagining if we had something like a Magma Opus type card. I feel like this card could really go off in that case. And it lets you dig to find those cards too, because maybe if you really really need to find like two massive spells, you just like put 3 points in the first mode and then hope to loot into something huge, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, by that.
I don't know. I think this is a very strange card. I think it's as far as Mind Springs go, it's one of the better ones because it has this weird like alternative mode that randomly allows you to generate like I don't know anywhere between 8 and 16 mana.
Yeah.
um,
I think it's also important to remember that this is one of the calamities that scales the best with paying more mana, more than 7 mana. Like a lot of the calamities very much have like, okay, well, if you're doing the 5-point mode, you're not doing the other modes. Whereas this
Yeah.
one, if you can like draw and discard a bunch before you free cast things, this card is like exponentially more powerful.
You can also double up on the last mode to get 4 spells.
That feels like overkill.
I mean, it is, but like, Heart of Zadina exists, so
For now.
anything's possible.
But yeah. Next up, we have Decisive Arcanist. I think this is another one of the cards which people have been most excited for. It's 1 and a blue for a 2/1 with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you can cast a modal instant or sorcery from your graveyard. You don't get to free cast it, unlike its namesake, but
Snapcaster also. Oh, Dreadhorde Arcanist. I see.
yeah. And then when you do, or you exile it, so no looping here. But yeah, just card advantage on a cheap flash body is pretty good.
So okay, I'm kind of a hater on this, to be honest.
I think I'm not
I
as hyped
think
as everyone
people
else is
will.
either, so I think I'm going to
I
be
think
excited to hear
people
this.
will use this card to justify playing bad decks.
Wait, that's the thing I meant to say. You're stealing my bit.
I'm sorry, Pip. I think that there are good cards that like let you that you can like there are good cards to flashback with this, and like you can build a deck that just runs a bunch of them where this is like Snapcaster Mage most of the time, but I don't think that's that good of a deck because like most of those cards are good because they are flexible, but they don't do any one thing as efficiently as possible. So usually you want to use those kinds of cards to supplement um, your cards that like your removal suite or your answer suite that is efficient at what it does,
Mm-hmm.
like to cover your bases, so to speak. So I think you might struggle with finding enough cards that you want to run in your deck that this flashbacks. And it's also like at some point it's just more mana than Cane Dancer. Like why don't you just run a Cane Dancer deck?
Yeah,
You know?
it feels pretty sad where you're like, okay, I'm gonna pay 2 mana for Decisive Arcanist and then another 2 mana for my Reconsider, and it's like, okay, I'm just gonna Cane Dancer and play my Portal Fracture. Cool. I just
Yeah,
Or even
card.
Reconsider.
I feel like the best card to get with this is actually Besot Charm.
Mm-hmm.
like you just play if you have enough like modal burn spells, like maybe just play a version of burn that runs this and flashback your Besot
No, but
Charm.
see, the funny part is, we actually have another Arcanist card, or like it's a Arcane Duelist, where it's like, whenever it becomes tapped, there's a spell in like CMC 1 spell that gains flashback, and it's like, yeah, okay, just run that instead of Decisive Arcanist because you can do it multiple times, and yeah, basically.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm a hater, but I can see this card seeing people will probably play it. I don't think it'll be very successful, but it's cool. It's a nice callback to Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm of mixed opinion here because on the one hand, I think that people forget that Cane Dancer is not the norm and that Snapcaster Mage is a kind of ridiculous card still. The second point of power is very real on this.
Yeah.
But I am with Dodger. I think it really depends on what cards you're flashing back, and I think having to warp your deck around what answers you can use kind of sucks, especially because inherently modal answers always cost more because they're doing something more flexible and thus more busted. So I don't know.
All right. So the next card is, let's see, it's Mage's Command, which is a uncommon command, and the 4 modes. So you choose 2, as is usual with commands, and the 4 modes are target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2. Target player returns a non-permanent card from their graveyard to their hand. You get to freeze a permanent, or target player gains hexproof until end of turn. So we kind of already discussed the edge case functionality of like tapping down permanents on Terra's Confluence. So you can kind of use this as a Frost Breath. You can use this to return any 2 non-permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand at instant speed, which is
You can't choose the same mode more than once.
You can't choose the same mode.
Oh right, okay, yeah, I'm trolling. But like you can do a double loot and then return a permanent, so this kind of replaces itself and filters you. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I feel like
I think ultimately that's going to be the main use, and the upside case is sometimes you get to gain hexproof in response to a burn spell, or sometimes you hexproof in response to burn spell plus freeze their goblin guide or whatever. You're like, okay, I am much less dead than I was a second ago.
I feel like I'm kind of low on this. I don't know if you guys agree.
I guess my feeling is I think it's cheap and versatile. That doesn't mean it's going to be good, but I think that means that it's worth trying. And that's just, I guess that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, I could see it being like a decent 1 or 2 in some decks.
I agree that people are probably going to play this more than they should, because ultimately that's one thing we see in MSEM is if a card is versatile, people will make excuses to play it, even when it might not actually be that good of an option.
All right. Cool.
Next up, we have Muktali Visionary, and I don't think we need to dwell on this one that long because I think unless you guys have something to say that's different.
Nah.
Yeah, okay, it's
Don't
very
we literally have this, but
white.
Not investigate.
Huh?
Don't we have this but draw a card? Like crazy.
I think we have
a prowess creature that draws a card on ETB.
Let me just instigator this real quick.
I know that we have blue cards which draw an ETB.
You're right. There's a 0/1 Hinasa Mystic.
Yeah, like isn't that card just better?
I think the point of power is semi-relevant / the artifact synergies, but I also did not know Hinasa Mystic existed, and I'm not ecstatic about running that card, so that's probably not a good sign.
Yeah, I feel like this is in a similar vein to the 2/1 white card, except likely worse. But if you're running a Concord Theocracy deck, and for some reason need more copies, then sure, I guess this exists.
Yeah, it's like nice to have, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's see. Next up, we have Phantasmal Owl.
Hoot hoot.
This card's kind of real, honestly. It is a 1-drop 1/1 flyer. Whenever it attacks, it gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying. This is actually a pretty premier 1-drop for your favorable wind style decks, because this often will attack as a 3/3 flyer at least.
And Flyers deck has actually been seeing like more and more play because we got in New Horizons we got Waxing Angel and we got whatever the favorable winds thing was, Stormcaller Drake.
The name too. The card that can turn into a creature.
Yeah, and it's just like again like I think that the deck is becoming like more and more real, rotation by rotation, which is weird to say because I feel like Flyers is usually kind of more of a limited deck than a constructed one ever, but
yeah.
I mean,
think, like,
this thing attacking for like 4 in the air.
Anything besides stats, and like when you're talking about like 1-drop flyers, there's definitely a lot of competition. You need a good reason to play this over a card like Vidispania. Even like Lord Rokai does a lot of work too. So you pretty much don't want to play this except in Flyers.deck. But if your goal is just to aggro your opponent down as fast as possible, like this does do that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an enchantment for whatever it's worth. Like, nice to keep in mind. Sometimes that matters.
But yeah, I think like this into another copy plus Waxing Angel attack for 3 on turn 2, and then attack for like 7 the next turn. Pretty not bad.
All right.
So next up we've got Roland's Confluence. So another one of the rare confluences. Um, and you can bounce a creature with mana value 2 or less, scry 1 and then loot, or in a weird turn, you can essentially go to creature but also shrink it. So another combat tricky style thing. Um,
Yeah,
I
this
don't
card's
love
really
any of these
weird.
modes. Is that weird to say? Like I feel like it's like okay, that's nice, but I can't think of a time when I would actively want any of these modes enough to play this card, especially because it's so
So, like,
reactive.
if you get the triple bounce, this card's pretty good. Um, you can usually get like amount of some amount of decent filtering from this, although you are going down in cards. Um, the only way you can like recoup card advantage from this is if you use the goad to like get their creature to suicide into you. Um, I don't know. Yeah, this card just seems very weird. Like it seems close to playable, but also like there is again pretty stiff competition. A lot of the decks that want to cast this might also be able to cast something like Bant Command, um, or Unraveling. Um, and yeah, I think the design of this set's modal spells are all very like they're very not obvious in like how powerful they are, and you kind of have to play with them to see for sure. I'd say.
Yeah, I think this is the confluence I might be the lowest on, but I also think it's one of those cards like you're gonna play it for the one time you get to bounce the 6 mana value worth of creatures and you feel like a god, and ignore all the other times that like send your hand to nothing. I think actually the types of decks that utilize this best are decks that run meaningfully large creatures, because if you can force your opponent to take bad attacks, and just like let you kill their creatures for free, this becomes noticeably more powerful.
Yeah, you can also theoretically like you can bounce your own creatures and then loot them away to like do some
Value.
big brain filtering. I don't know, like it seems sort of sus for 4 mana, but you can. You can bounce your own creatures in response to removal spells. Uh,
All
eh,
right, so what you do is you bounce your own that one red green reef crowned guy, and then you loot him away, and then on end step he comes back, so you're just up cards.
sick.
Mhm. I like tuned out to
All
read
right.
it. I
Okay.
tuned out to read a text, and then I tune back in and I hear like absolutely god awful brewing, and this is how I know it's time to move on to another card.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So this card is very potentially powerful. It's Stargazer.
Horrifying. This card
Yeah.
is horrifying.
So it is a 1 mana enchantment. It is legendary, which is actually very important. Whenever you draw a card, put a dream counter on it, and you can remove 7 dream counters from it and exile it to shuffle your graveyard and hand into your library. Then draw 7 cards. So the headline here is 1 mana Time Twister. The caveat is that you need to draw 7 cards while it's on the battlefield before you can use the effect. And the fact that it's legendary means that you can't just play another one and like have the first trigger the second, which is pretty important because oftentimes what makes Time Twister good is if you're chaining them to keep your card flow going. I still think that like it's not that hard to empower this very quickly. We have so many careful study effects, lots of ways to churn through your deck. Um, and like if you're playing Storm, having access to a Time Twister that you have to invest 0 mana into on your combo turn makes it a lot easier to refill. So I think this is pretty good. It does get rid of your graveyard if you care about that. So like that might be one issue, but
One of the things that I think people should utilize this with is looting effects. Since obviously just like cantripping 7 times is rough, but casting, 2 or 3 lootings plus some natural draws does get this to pop off. So
yeah.
that's
You
kind of
see, what I'm going
terrifying.
to do is I'm actually going to play the 1 mana let your opponent draw a card uh from this set. Easy.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that works very well with this.
Mm.
Those probably could go in the same deck very easily.
Yep, and I think having a
Um,
bunch of looters also helps you just get to this quite quickly if your deck is something that relies on it. So it's
yeah.
just a match made in heaven.
This is also so there is if this is the engine that your deck functions on, you can also tutor for it with Duchess Odelia the Seventh, um,
Oh, true.
which is kind of cool. Uh,
Duchess Odelia, by the way, was a major factor in the cost increase on nerfing the ancient tome from from 1 mana to
yeah,
2 mana.
yeah, I fully agree with that. Yeah, I think that so. I don't know how real this combo is, but if you have Witch's Invocation in play, you can activate Stargazing and actually flash in another one in response to the activation to instantly have your second one charged up.
I feel like anytime you like
Mm-hmm.
put Witch's Invocation into something as like a mention, it's usually too much of a meme dream.
Yeah, probably, but yeah,
Mhm.
they're both enchantments. One of them is cantripping 2-drop. Like,
Mhm. Yeah, I
doesn't
guess
bother me
like
that
okay,
much.
if you can have like enough things that care about shared qualities between them, then sure. But
Yeah,
I feel like literally every time Witch's Invocation has been brought up, not like in just in these reviews, but just like in deck building, it's always like
yeah,
I want to believe, but it never
yeah.
gets there.
You're right. Yeah, that's why I said it was kind of a pipe dream, but
Mhm.
it's a fun interaction.
And I think this is probably one of like the hypest on its face cards in the set. It's just
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this card gets nerfed too, to be honest.
Dodger on a real positive streak this review.
I mean,
And
I
a
don't think
nerf for
that's like a
you?
negative statement to say. It's like I think it's a strong card, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm just
But
memeing.
yeah, yeah. All right.
Okay.
Next up, we have Travel by Starlight. It is a functional reprint of Chart Course. So for 2 mana, you draw 2 cards, and then you discard a card unless you attack this turn.
And like
You all love
Admonish's
Chart Course?
Disenchant, this is another effect that I'm surprised we haven't had in MSEM yet. It just feels very simple. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean we all love Chart Course.
yeah.
Chart Course good.
Oh yeah, I
I
remember
think
there's the
Charticor
one. There's that one when we did the Lovey review. I think the lack of Charticors was the reason one of the cards there was kind of like, oh, word. But now that we have an actual Charticors, probably not going to make
Oh
it.
yes,
Sad.
Supply Run, which is the 4-drop that you can cast for 2 mana if you
oh yeah,
attacked this turn, or like if a creature was unblocked this turn, something like that.
Yep.
yeah. I don't know. I think this card's like might not actually see play if there's not a home, but it's always a nice effect to have. And like, there'll
I mean,
probably
I
be
think
a
it
deck that's
comes down to like um, this versus crossing the fog. It's like how often are you attacking expecting to hit them? Which sounds dumb, but like there are times sometimes where you're like you're gonna have to take your beatings and be like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna make some trades here, and then I can like recoup that with travel by starlight or something. But I think in general, crossing the fog is definitely the number one. Or crossing the fog or ambitious dreams or before looking at this, probably. Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, let's move on to black, since I think we're about halfway done because of how many
Mm-hmm.
cards blue and white have.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah,
We're on card
um,
26 out of 50. So, yep, about exactly
Nice.
halfway through.
so the first black card is also a riddle. Dark Behemoth is a black and 3 for a 1/1 indestructible riddle artifact creature, and when it dies, return another target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Oh, but it's hard to kill because it's indestructible. Um, okay, so here's a couple things to keep in mind. One, this is an artifact that vastly changes how reliably you can tutor for it. Um, two, the fact that it is a creature obviously means that now we have a, you know, approximately on rate, if you have a way of enabling it, reanimation spell that you can tutor if you can tutor for creatures. But the thing I really want to note is 2 of these plus a sack outlet generates infinite sacks. Obviously, right now we have a aristocrats deck that's doing that with a far fewer dead pieces, but I think this is worth keeping in mind, especially because 1/1 indestructible kind of stonewalls a lot of pressure. Not enough that it'll like single-handedly swing any matchup for you, but it's not an awful card. And it also makes control's life more awkward because a lot of those decks rely on -X sweepers and Exeunt. And if they kill this while killing other creatures, this just pops back one of those creatures. So I think this card is better than it looks. But I think the riddle is correct, and I think where this card really shines is when you can really find a stupid way to abuse it.
Yeah, it's like a good combo piece.
Make it 3 mana, then I'll see it.
Yeah. I don't know. Like as far as combo pieces go, like it's not the worst if you just play it by itself. You can play it out, be reasonably safe, and like your opponent won't kill it before you go off, and then you can go off. So I don't know. Could see it in like some kind of like Kiki Cord style deck as like a way to get a 2-card combo going.
Yeah.
This does pretty stupid things with Revelark if this ever gets together with Revelark somehow.
Yeah, I think the main thing is the fact that MSEM has been burned multiple times by cards like Chick You Champion. We're just, I don't think we're ever going to see that sort of thing again.
Yeah,
which is unfortunate because this is one of the few cards that makes me kind of wish we would. I guess this gives you a, I'm 80% sure this gives you a deterministic Valina's Aid pile. I just don't know what it looks like off the top of my head.
That's actually pretty hype. I know that.
Wait, no, Valina's Aid is now CMC 2 or less. Never mind, moving on.
Okay.
Because of this exact thing. Let's talk about Darn's Confluence. So, Black 3, Confluence, so choose 3, you can choose the same mode more than once. Each opponent sacrifices a creature, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Choose a player and look at their hand, choose a non-land card from among them, they discard it. So, again, the base case of this is probably 5 mana, you sacrifice 3 creatures, which is a little bit expensive, but is really, really saucy, especially if you are in a deck that plays the board, so you don't want to run a board wipe. And the versus decks without creatures, triple Thoughtseize is absolutely brutal. If this card resolves, most control decks and a lot of combo decks are going to really struggle to beat you from that point. And the fail case of, well, six ball you is going to kill people. So yeah. I think this card's very real. I think we need to see a black deck that wants to play to the board, that wants to cast 5-drops, and those two things are a little bit tricky. But maybe you also play like it as a one-of in villainy or something.
It's nice that you can just win the game if they're at 6 too. Like
yeah,
that's not a bad mode either. And like if maybe they have like 2 cards in hand or like 1 card in hand and no creatures on the board, you can always just like take their last card and drain them. Like it's nice to have a dump mode basically. Besides that, like I think 5 mana is definitely a lot. I like maybe in decks with like a little bit ramp, like maybe decks like the Rock or Jund, this could be good. Besides that, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical, but if you're high on it, then that's probably means more than my my assessment.
Yeah. I don't know. I want to believe in this card at least. I think it's the sort of card that I'm too much of a I absolutely believe in the mana efficiency of cards first and foremost, and it's very hard for me to justify ever putting a 5-drop into my deck, especially when that 5-drop isn't something like Xanagan. But I think that for people who are a little bit bolder, anyone who wants to revisit the old black-green mid-range control decks that ran like Explore so they could hit their Kaijun on turn 3, those sorts of decks love this card.
Yeah. Or maybe like Dreamsight wants a couple of these or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little that feels a little awkward, but I totally I get the appeal of that. Like tutoring this up when you're ready to kill someone type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so next up is Descend Upon the Tomb. This is the black member of the like give them a card cycle. And it is a Thoughtseize that you only lose 1 life. So like 1 mana, you Thoughtseize them, but they draw a card first. So like you do get to see the card that they got, and you can potentially get that card. I'll be honest, I don't like the idea of a Thoughtseize where you actually go down card advantage.
Right?
Like I don't think that's ever been something I really want to do. I think that there are good enough options that are versatile enough that I don't think there's really ever a reason to put this into your deck. I'm just gonna be honest. I think this card is very overrated.
I think people are really excited to play this card, and I think the thing that makes this card shitty is not going to hit people for quite some time. Because the truth is, the 2-mana version of this card is fine. We have better options. Prying Inquiry is in the same set as a reprint. Like, very much, if you're casting this for 2 mana, you would much rather be casting Prying Inquiry. But the 1 mana mode on this, I think people aren't going to realize how many games they really shouldn't have fired this off on 1. Like, if you're ever against a fair deck, it's a nightmare to fire this off on 1, and against a combo deck, it's not that great either. Like, sometimes you'll get lucky and like you'll hit their 1 combo piece, but 2 for 1ing yourself to take out 1 combo piece that they didn't spend any mana on is probably not worth it.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of hate that you lose 1 life here. Feels very unnecessary.
I mean, yeah, that's how I feel about it on Prying Inquiry too. Yeah. Not.
Well, that's kind of, that was more of like a balance issue with Prying Inquiry.
Yeah, I just.
I think this, like, I don't know. We've already said our piece.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything you wanted to add, Caillou, or?
I don't know because I missed the first part of it, but I'm going to assume that y'all covered it pretty well.
We kind of crapped all over it. Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that okay. I guess that's what I agree. I think it's been overhyped a lot because people see this and go, unconditional hand attack on God, and it's like, no. So
I think it's just like if you're running hand attack, if you're smart, like your hand attack's going to be basically unconditional anyway. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
I mean, play the right spells.
Look, Duress has worked for me for the past, 3 years or whatever of playing MSEM. By God, it's going to continue working for me.
I think Stolen Secrets is still,
Stolen Secrets, my beloved.
It's a very good card. It's very skill testing. Some decks really benefit from playing pay up. I still think Thievery is underplayed.
I agree with that.
The new card, Corrupted Memory, is also a pretty solid option from Arcadai, so I just don't see a reason to ever play this. There are so many better options.
I think the reason to play this is you can abuse the fact that your opponent drew a card somehow. Like, yeah,
maybe.
You have the thing that stops your opponent from drawing a card in play.
So theoretically, if you're playing a Megarim deck,
that's good because it puts a card in their hand for you to take it out. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a way to trigger Megarim even if they empty their hand. Which is kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'm actually gonna, because now that we're talking about this, I remembered. Koreki Mage Hunter is a card that people were really excited about when it came out, and then it did stone cold nothing. It's possible it's worth re-exploring that card again, especially as a lot of decks that draw a bunch of cards are seeing play.
Did
it plays great with this cycle.
I thought Koreki plus Rahith and Entolon Erasure was kind of a deck for a bit, where it was just
It was a deck one person played, and it was kind of a meme deck.
Okay. It was just it existed when I joined the format, and lots of stuff around that time I didn't know how much was real meta and how much was just individual memes. So
yeah, and that's the thing where back then when there were 8 people playing the format, it was functionally impossible to differentiate between is this deck real or is someone just forcing their beloved crap pile. And I think the truth was 70 to 80% of us were not playing anything remotely good. And the remaining percentage was just nobody who just kept beating us up and taking our lunch money.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but enough of MSEM history. Let's move on to the next card, which is Eternal Duneborn. So, pretty simple. It's a recursive black 2-drop, black 1-drop with 2 power. Here the trigger condition is when you draw your second card each turn, it comes back. I think MSEM has a pretty damn high density of this one. So I'm not sure there's much we need to say about this one unless you guys have some spice.
So I'm more interested in using this to rummage, and indefinitely just just turning all my omens into free draws. Like I think this could be a fun thing to do with Dusk Lieutenant and maybe other forebode cards, or like whatever other ways you have of looting this away or discarding it for value or etc. etc.
So
Gift
kind
of the
so,
Phoenix
so,
on turn 1.
Yeah,
so you're thinking
exactly.
kind of
Yeah,
like what is the small luxuries, but like
Yeah, but the fail case on this is not 1 mana draw card, it's
this is
1 mana
like
1.
yeah,
this is
for
like
sure.
small luxuries, but for aggro decks, basically.
Got you, got you.
Yeah.
And it's also nice that like you can play it as a aggro creature, like it trades off or gets removed or whatever, and then like you can very easily get it back. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't.
and then you start doing the like value plan.
Yeah, so I think it's a pretty low opportunity cost card. It won't be the best option for decks that are just trying to aggro people down, but if you're trying to do random stupid dodger type stuff, like this is actually a pretty decent cog for that. So yeah.
Yeah. Talking about the next card, we have one of our with the first planeswalker we're going to be talking about. Technically not the first one in the set.
I think it's the only planeswalker we're talking about, right? Spoilers?
Correct. The
Yeah.
other ones
The other ones
the
either
the one other playable one is already in the format, so we're not
Yeah.
talking about him.
Yeah.
So Eve, the Mastermind, black for a 2 loyalty starting planeswalker. Eve is the cat. For anyone wondering at home. +1 up to 1 target creature gains death touch until your next turn. -1 each player loses 3 life unless they discard a card or sack a creature. -6 you may play permanent cards from your opponent's graveyards and you may spend mana as though it was mana of any color to do so. That's why I'm interested in this card. So I think the +1 and -1 both are kind of whatever. Like the +1 on some mana dorks or like your Elvish Visionary Voltron card off of is kind of neat. It's like solid value. It's not good. The -1 is actually symmetrical. You can break the symmetry, but since it gives people it's a symmetrical punisher. So your opponent will always have something they're willing to do. They'll either have disposable creatures or cards in hand or life. It's very difficult to make sure they don't have any of those things. So what we want to do with this card is we want to play her on 2, plus her to 3, and then on turn 5, turn 6, I can't do the math right now, you get to ult her. And the ult is a terrifying amount of card advantage. You will bury someone in this. Even against control decks that don't run a bunch of permanents, the kind of base case is you play a land from their graveyard every single turn, which is a huge amount of mana advantage. If they ever have any creature, if it's like a mid-range mirror, you basically can't lose that. I don't know. I think and also if you ever kill one of their planeswalkers, they're totally boned.
Are there any good pingers? Like cutting Sparkmage style cards?
That's a good question.
Because like this is a fun combo with that.
Yeah, there's probably.
So okay, my take on this card is actually very different from yours, Pip. I am interested in just spamming the -1. Like treat this as a 2-use spell. I think that it's not that hard to build a deck where you actively want to discard your own cards. I have perhaps some experience in that area. um, and so like this is a way to do that while also pressuring your opponent's life total at the same time. On turn 2, it's fairly likely that they won't have a creature, so you're either doing something you want to do, right, like discarding a card, or maybe you have a creature you want to die. And you're getting something from your opponent, either pressuring their life total or you're actually getting a card from them, right? So in those kind of decks, I think that there's an argument for this to like do kind of epoxy style thing. It doesn't do so as efficiently, but like 2 uses of that effect is kind of a nice deal for 2 mana. So I might be interested in it. I don't think it necessarily makes the cut, but like you can also play this as like kind of your play early win con, as you said, because -6 is not that much loyalty. So kind of a flexible card. 2 mana planeswalkers are always so hard to evaluate. See reference Watsy printed Tybalt. So yeah, that's kind of like what I'll say about this.
Yeah, I mean, MSEM does not actually have that solid of a pedigree of 2-mana planeswalkers. We have a lot of them, and
I mean, they're all bad,
bas-
right?
I mean,
yeah,
they're all
basically
banned,
only
or
one of
they're all banned or bad.
yeah one of them was good and is now
Fair.
was banned and is no longer in the format, and otherwise
Man,
like
I would have abused the fuck out of Zetla.
yeah, that's true. The only other one that had any like pedigree or reasonable success was Alexa back when she went infinite with Worlds Colliding, and outside of Worlds Colliding, Alexa has like a 30% win rate or something like that. People
You know, I've
keep
always thought Artie was kind of decent.
yeah, he's good. I think like good value, but just I definitely think if there is a time where Artie is good / was good in MSAM, now is definitely not it because people
Yeah.
are playing to the board way too much.
All right.
But yeah, okay. Back to Revio cards.
We have Exhaust. It is a 2-mana instant. Costs black, and target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is its base toughness. So basically, if it hasn't been buffed, it's dead. Which pretty good against decks that aren't named mono green counters. It kills indestructible creatures. It can, even if it doesn't kill the creature, it can basically make it do no damage that turn.
It's a very solid option versus some cards which black just could not deal with cheaply before.
Alright, Pip, is this card good in villainy?
Exhaust?
Yeah.
It's fine. I think this is probably better than Strike Through Shadows, which we have historically on and off played. But I think the circumstance where you play this is when you're playing something like mono black or red black villainy, and if you're doing either one of those things, I would politely suggest that you don't do that instead. But I think there are some things this misses, like anything with +1/+1 counters. I think that's equipped with toughness boost. I think that's enchanted, but I think those are kind of few and far between. And then you also have things like Herald of Oblivion, where this kills him no matter how big he is. Because usually that thing is smaller than its base stats even.
Everyone plays Herald of Oblivion, right?
Yeah.
We really needed a way to answer that card. It's too good.
Yeah. Too good. But yeah, solidly fine. Good to keep in mind when you're looking to kill people, or when you're looking to kill creatures.
This is like probably staple, honestly, or close to it. But the double black does hurt a little bit.
Yeah, limited splashability a bit.
Okay, next up we have the Black Calamity of the Plague variety. It is it costs the same line X. First 3 modes are all 1, 2, and 5 points as usual. The 1-point mode is you have target player reveal their hand and discard a non-land card. The 2-point mode is destroy target creature. And then the 5-point mode is you get to resurrect each creature card in target player's graveyard onto your control. So
this one kind of, I think this one's really bad unless you're doing the kind of mind twisty mode, and I think there are very few decks,
though, right?
Yeah, although that's just discards a card, right? That's not.
It's better than this because you don't get to choose the card that they discard. It's just.
Do you with Epic?
With Epic, you do. Yeah, it's just each opponent discards a card in the first mode.
Yeah, that's worse. So this means that you always hit non-lands.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that part. Yeah, I'm dumb.
Whereas that one, they can discard lands, which frequently comes up.
I guess it's sort of weird if how often are you really casting your Mind Shatter not to kill their whole hand? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, but at that point, it's kind of a wash, right? Like, if you're casting at X = 3, in both cases, they're going to be left with pretty much nothing.
Yeah, I guess it is nice that if you're guaranteed to get cards.
Yeah, you're gaining something, but I think the main thing that kind of kills this card for me is, unlike all of the other ones, this is in the same color as Master of the Veil, and also the new tweak the settings. So, whereas the other ones are like, other reasons to play those big mana control decks in those colors, or they're bringing something new to the table, this doesn't. Like, the only thing this does that is kind of interesting is the 7 mana mode on this to be Rise of the Dark Realms. That's kind of cool in EDH.
I don't know if this is like a control card. It feels more like a mid-range card to me.
Maybe that's
And,
part of where I'm missing it.
Like I think this is much more reasonable to cast for like 6 mana than something like Tweak the Settings or Master's Veil is.
I strongly agree with that. The other thing is like, I don't know how many of you guys have been Cradle of Corruption to death recently, but that happens to be like once every 3 GPs, and it's always like, motherfucker, not this again.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And Plague Calamity does have that as a 7 mana mode, which, like, 7 mana is obviously more than a land drop, but I think a kind of decent-ish mid-range card that you can use to immediately reanimate your entire graveyard if you, like, have been ground to a halt, that's probably worth something, especially if you have, like, an Archive Guardian that picks us back up again, but I don't know.
Alright. Yeah, I think we've said our piece on it.
Yeah, enough ink has been spilled.
Okay, so the next card is, I think we can be pretty brief about this. Voidbringer, it's Labman, but it's black, and it's an enchantment. Besides that, it's Labman. So, yay, we have Labman now.
Yep. I think the healthiest, the most exciting thing about this card is now there's, like, one fewer reason that we absolutely must keep the Omen draw spell that wins the game. There's like one fewer reason we need to keep that legal. So my eyes are on that now. Yeah, last passage is on its last legs here.
But yeah, I mean, we've had this is like our first creature-based empty library cheat that doesn't have hoops, because we've had Icons Portal, but then you need to flip that, so you'd require a lot of islands. There's Kagetsu, but then Kagetsu doesn't actually win you the game. You just get
it's just Omniscience.
Omniscience.
It's
and then last
only
passage,
Omniscience.
Oh yeah, only Omniscience. And then last passage is not a creature, which is a whole problem in and of itself. But yeah, Voidbringer is just Labman, and I think that's just neat.
Sweet. All right, moving on to red.
Yep.
All right.
Our first red card is Bloodstained Calamity. And whew, boy, this one's a whopper. So the first mode is essentially deals 1 damage to each creature, player, and planeswalker. Second mode, you get to, in kind of a oddity for red, just straight up return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. But of course, if you choose that mode, it exiles itself, so you don't get to do loopy shenanigans. And then at full 5, it just shoots something for 10, which is pretty not bad if you're looking for a red way to just kill someone. Because I think previously our main big X spells with extra utility have been, like we've mentioned, in black and in white. So this definitely does the I just will kill you dead.
So, fun fact, this actually kills people at the same exact mana threshold that Master of the Veil does. So that's actually really exciting. The advantage Master of the Veil has is sometimes you cast X equals 8 because your opponent's like taking 4 damage off shock lands or whatever. But the fact that this has 12 mana, whoops, you're dead, makes it kind of interesting. And the 2 mana mode is a crazy amount of utility. Or sorry, the 2-star mode is a crazy amount of utility for your win condition. Also, like, casting this for 3 mana to kill a 1 toughness creatures, like, that's never the intended use case, but like that's a good use case to have stapled to your 12 mana kill your opponent.
Or like if you're already in a board state where 1 damage will kill everything, you can play this for 5 and kill everything and get something back.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I don't know. I think this is the Calamity that has the most promise in the format.
Yeah, probably the best one. I agree.
Which is kind of hilarious because it's kind of the one where 2 of the modes are very similar, more so than any of the others, so it actually has like the least flexibility almost in how it functions.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, next up we have Confront the Riddle Master. So basically, it's 5 mana, but that is never going to be relevant because the main thing you're using this is you can free cast it when a spell of yours is countered, and it just deals 4 damage to any target. I think that
It
this
also
is a.
can't be countered. So
Mhm.
it's very specifically like burn player saying, "Hey, fuck you, counter spells."
Yeah, I think that this is
Um,
probably just a sideboard. I think this is 100% a sideboard card, but I don't know how much it's a sideboard meme versus a sideboard genuine threat. I'm leaning towards more of a sideboard meme, but also Chef talking about like, can you imagine playing against someone with 2 of these in their opener? Just gave me like a big shudder down my spine. So I'm like,
I think
Yeah, I
like
mean, sometimes people high roll you. Like, I think that's where I'm at, is like, you just gotta accept that sometimes if someone really wants to beat you and you're playing a deck that runs counter spells, like, they're going to beat you. But if you're a deck where, something like Dream Sight, where you're actually interacting on a bunch of other axes, and you can sometimes hand attack them or just kill other creatures or go long stretch of time without countering their spells, this card's gonna just sit there. And if it was any other Lava Spike, they would be getting more done. But it's not, so they're not. Like,
so. Here's my problem with this card as a sideboard card in Burn. I don't think Burn struggles against decks with counter magic for the
bingo.
most part, because like if you're playing Lava Spikes deck and you're trading your opponent's trading 1 for 1 with you, like you're getting at least a 1 mana advantage each time, probably, right? Um, so I would like rather devote sideboard slots to cards that actually, well, or like to cards that actually help me in matchups where I lose. You know, like that's
Yeah,
just I don't
like
know.
the combo decks that Burn can't beat to save its life. Like,
I've seen some people say that like Burn keeps losing against tempo. I don't think
I'm
that
gonna
should be happening, to be honest.
I mean, the reason it's happening has nothing to do with counter spells, right? It's
Yeah,
it's because the tempo deck has a fast clock. It has a bunch of burn spells to end its opponent's, game, and it runs 4 solar flares in the 75. Like, you, you play your 1 drop, and your opponent, instead of countering it, solar flares it. You're just look at this and be like, oh yeah, this is how I play this matchup, right? I don't know,
yeah.
like,
So I
I'm
don't.
cutting counter spells when I'm playing tempo versus burn.
Mhm. So it's like it's if you want to beat counterspell decks, like this will definitely do it if you're playing burn. But I just feel like burn decks already beat counterspell decks anyway. So I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah,
Mm.
That's why I'm okay with this. If this was like you may cast this for free if your opponent gained life, I would be like,
yeah, that'd be less
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, like this is one of the very few instances where like actual factual free cast spell is just like, yeah, okay, whatever. And in fact, may perhaps actively not good. But yeah, um,
I will say it's not a bad card. It doesn't
it's a very
solve
situational one. Yeah.
problems that you actually have when you play burn.
Mm-hmm.
Say, all right. Next up, we have Tithon's Confluence. So it's 4 mana. The 3 modes you have to pick from are you can make 2/1/1s with haste, and they get exiled at the beginning of the next end step. You can deal 2 damage to a creature or planeswalker, or you can give target creature double strike until end of turn. So I think like the main 2 modes you're looking at here are like make many tokens attack. If you have like some kind of like I don't know, Impact Tremors ish thing or Hell Rider or something that can represent a lot of damage. It's also nice that if they're random blockers, you can just clean them up. And yeah, I mean that's like the main way you use this card. I think Double Strike is nice to have every once in a while, but I feel like a deck that wants to jam a bunch of tokens probably won't have creatures with a lot of power.
Yeah, I think the double strike mode's the worst mode here. Um, I think the card is entirely reasonable, but I'm not. I can't think of any deck or any specific deck where I'm actively excited to run it. But I'm sure people will find something.
I think if you have like those kind of like red white tokens decks that blue sometimes runs, this card might make sense in those. Besides that, yeah, I don't really see a reason to run it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next up, we have Fiery Burst. Another one of the more exciting cards. Like this, the entire like have your opponent draw a card cycle is pretty exciting on some level. But yeah, this is just straight lightning bolt. Um, and again, I think this is another one where it's kind of hard to evaluate, but I think much more so than the others in this cycle, um, you can make them drawing a card not matter because they're just fucking dead. So it
Yeah, I
definitely
think
has that going for it.
this card is probably a staple. I think most burn decks should be playing this.
I definitely am looking forward to my opponent casting this, making me draw a card, and me drawing into counter magic that I need to counter it.
I guess, but like if you're in the
No,
position to do that, you probably were gonna win that game anyway.
It's still worth it for them to do it. I think this
Yeah.
card is still good. I partially dislike it because this looks like a bolt, but it's actually secretly a spike, and we were
Yeah.
just trying to cut down on those.
Well, but like the fact that it's a spike that can also kill, like it doesn't have
Yeah,
any of the
no.
drawbacks of a spike.
Yeah.
So like,
So
yeah.
I think there's a good chance that this card gets looked at like in a couple months if Burn is back to being fucking everywhere. But I think anyone who's excited about the black card in this cycle more than this one is actually trolling.
Yeah, I mean this is the only one that I'm sure we'll see tons of play. I think all the other ones are up for debate. I mean the blue one is probably if it's good, it's probably the best. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
is
the
there
next
even
one
a
is
green one in this cycle?
Oh, sorry.
There's
Yeah,
one,
but we're not talking about it.
Oh no, wait! I just
because
remembered what it
it's-
was. Yeah, okay. It's just
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
lands. Yeah, okay, okay.
Okay, so the next one is Flame Caller's command. One red. It's a command, so choose two, and the modes are exile the top two cards of your library. You may play them until the end of your next turn. Add red. Creature you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It deals 1 damage to each creature you don't control. This card is awesome for Storm. So if you have a cost reducer, this card pays for itself and draws 2 cards. I don't know about you guys, but draw 2 cards for free, pretty good. And honestly, the fact that it's sometimes you can cast them until the end of your next turn, which is also huge. Also in Storm, this dealing 1 damage to each creature you don't control really helps you versus like the smarmy little creature deck matchups where it's like, oh, they have a tall, they have like all of these things that you're like, cool, 1 damage to each of them. That's not always going to kill them, but it sometimes is. So I think this card's the real deal.
Yeah, I didn't consider the cost reduction. I don't think this card is like a de facto inclusion in Storm, but I could see it being playable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I really have to say. I think it's fine. Okay. Next up we have Illuminated Firebird. So this is kind of an interesting Phoenix design. It's 3 mana. It's flying, can't block, and it only has 2/1 stats. But the way you reanimate it, it comes back whenever you draw your second card each turn. So it's much easier to reanimate than something like an Arclight Phoenix type card, right? And you can basically instantly proc it with any cantrip, meaning that if your opponent doesn't exile it, it's going to be very hard for them to deal with it permanently.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much like it. You can also get it out on turn 1 very easily with any rummage. So like you cast your Gift of the Phoenix, boom, you have a 2/1 flyer. I mean, that's probably it, right? Is there anything else that rummages in turn 1? I don't think we have Insolent Detonate or Merchant of the Veil type things.
Not yet, no.
Yeah,
Okay, so, yeah.
Not having haste definitely makes me feel a little bit more wary about this card in terms of like taking slots in actual factual phoenixes, but I think that what you're saying about it being easier to trigger means that there might be like a more measured version of the deck perhaps that wants this. But yeah, I think the lack of haste is maybe it doesn't seem that major to you guys, but I feel like from when I play the deck, like having haste so you can just immediately swing in for a bunch on the turn that you go off, like turn 3 or turn 2, has been super important. So
here's where I'm at on this.
And I feel like
you don't have to dedicate as much deck building space to making sure that you can recur this. And I feel like there may be strategies, even like Burn, or like some Burn analogous deck where like you can incidentally work this into your deck and like it won't be that hard to just have it come down as a free 2/1 flyer.
I feel like I almost want Suisse more than Illuminated Firebird there, but I might just be barking up the wrong tree.
Or like so this is Hugoable, right? Like you can run this in like Hugo deck that has I don't know, that might be a little bit more difficult, but like
So the other thing I would say to consider is I think this is better in Dredge. If that deck ever shows its face.
Yeah.
Again, that's a deck that wants to be running Myoga Firebird decks. You have to play in a way that allows you to chain 3 spells on turn 3. Or else your deck doesn't work. Whereas Dredge is happy to just cast a looting spell turn 1, looting spell turn 2, and then just start killing you.
I guess another way to think about it is that it is actually very easy to have this card basically just be actual factual Narcomoeba with +1 attack.
That feels like a little bit of stretch, but sure, yeah.
Kind of, but literally any cantrip brings it back, and if you mill this over ever, you cast Monkey Shines,
yeah, true.
You can. I don't know. I just feel like you don't have to work very hard to get this back at all. And I think that you throw this into Cannon Dredge, this probably does a pretty good Narcomoeba impression because that deck runs so many ways to draw extra cards.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this card is actually better than it looks, and people have already been talking about it. Okay.
I'm cautious. I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, but emphasis on cautiously.
I actually could see this card needing a nerf. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I'm glad this card I'm pretty sure used to have haste, and I was like, I don't think this is a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's more just about how free it is, essentially. It does Narcomoeba like things. That's what I'll say. Okay. Next up we have
Splitting Image.
Splitting Image. Yeah. Should I take this one, or does anyone else want to?
Oh no, go ahead.
All right. So Splitting Image is a 2-mana 2/1 flash. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 any number of times, and whenever you do, you get to copy a spell. You also get to choose new targets and reselect modes for the copies. So, Dual Caster Mage, but it now costs 4 mana, but it can copy any spell. So obviously, using the new copy permanent stuff that custom designers took to in a big way when that was revealed. I think that I don't know. It's kind of like a multi-giger-ish design. It does neat things. It's a 2-drop, so you can monument it in.
Oh, that's cute. I actually like that. I hadn't thought of that.
You can monument it in, and you're more likely to be able to pay 2.
Yeah.
So
it's
cool.
Also neat in terms of being able to copy your opponent's stuff. You don't need to control the spell.
Yeah, I think Caillou mentioned that it might have combo potential on a thread before. I don't remember what the context was.
I mean, I think the main thing was that Dual Caster Mage and something that flickers. The main thing is that you also need some way to you also need something that generates 2 mana on ETB, which is no small.
That's a hard sell.
Well, we no longer have Peak Point Presence.
I was literally just about to say does Peak Point Presence work? But no. Okay.
That would also kill you.
I mean, death and victory, basically the same thing. But yeah, I think overall, it's just it's just really solid value.
Yeah.
It's unusual for red to get this kind of straight up value, especially when you're copying permanent spells.
Yeah, there's lots of. I feel like lots of people are gonna be tripped up where they're gonna be like, "You can't copy that," and it's gonna be like, "Yeah, no, just read the card. It isn't just insert a sorcery spell."
I feel like
they're
we're
what?
Get some pie complaints.
We have Fog Spewer. We get enough pie complaints every day.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, it's. I think in the end, it's just a really solid, cool. I think it's cool by virtue of how flexible and strong it is, and it's always nice to have those kind of push for constructed cards.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right,
next up, I think we're moving out of red and into green with our first green card from Far and Near. So this is 4 mana, draw 6 cards. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I think that if you're playing this card, you want to be playing it in a deck where it is that. So what it actually is, you reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put all non-creature cards reveal its way into your graveyard, and then put the rest back on any top, and then draw cards equal to the number of cards put on top. So basically just mill any non-creature cards in your top 6, draw the rest. So yeah, I think if you want to put this in a deck which is mostly, if not all, other than from far and near creature plus lands. Um, the main thing is what kind of deck looks like that, but also wants a draw six. Because we've had decks like that, but they've mostly been
Okay,
aggressive enough
so
that they didn't want this.
how many cards do you need to draw off this to be happy? If you draw 3 cards off of this, are you happy?
I think
Because that's like
four.
concentrate slash harmonized. Okay, so you want to draw 4 cards?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Do you
I'd
want
say
to
I
know?
want more.
Do you know what? Do you want to know the odds of drawing 4 cards if you have 30 creatures in your library, which is a lot of creatures?
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not that high, right?
It's 30%.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you not counting lands because it alts? Oh wait, no, it doesn't. Non. It does. It's not non.
Yeah.
Never mind.
yeah. If you have 36 creatures in your library, so like 36 creatures, 4 of these, 20 lands, which is kind of crazy talk.
No,
You're a coin
okay,
flip of whether or not you draw 4 creatures.
never mind. For some reason I
Yeah,
thought
it's
that
hard.
for some reason I thought
Oh, yeah.
it's put all non-creature non-land cards, but no, that's so much
Yeah,
worse. Never
Yeah, if
mind.
this hit lands too, it'd be something I consider. I think I would never run this card as it is.
Fair. Okay,
uh,
so basically what you're saying is I just have to petition Emily to buff it to also say non-land. So
I
that
think what you need to do is learn to read, my friend.
damn. Okay.
after
I'm
Caillou has been
sorry.
savagely killed,
I've definitely done that before.
Mm-hmm.
let's move on to the last calamity.
Yeah.
Dodger, why don't you talk about this because you were hyped about
Okay.
it?
This is my favorite Calamity design personally. I think this card is really cool and it offers a ton of play. So the 3 modes you get here are whenever a creature attacks this turn, it gets +1/+1. Um, that's for 1 point. For 2 points, you make a 3/3 worm with haste, and for 5 points, you get to for each token you can or for each creature you control, you create a token that's a copy of it, and you give all the tokens haste. So first of all, it's an overrun. You can cast it for 5 mana, gives your creatures +3/+3. They don't gain trample, so that's not ideal. But so obviously we're not just gonna run overrun in MCM, right? For 4 mana, you get a 3/3 haste, also not great. However, from there you get some pretty interesting directions that you can scale it. So you can have this be 6 mana, make 2/3/3s, 8 mana, make 3/3/3s. For 5 mana, you can make a 4/4 haste, or like you for 6 mana you can make a 5/5 haste, and then basically I think that like there's a lot of mathy ways to break down exactly how much damage this can do, and I don't know exactly where like the apex of the parabola is in terms of like mana to damage ratio and how satisfied you are with that. I still think that like an overrun that can also just create a board presence if you don't have one already is pretty interesting, and like this is definitely the one that you're pretty excited about pumping a bunch of mana into, and green decks incidentally have the best ability to do that. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't count this out. I think it's great in decks with a ton of mana dorks, and like generally decks that might have a big board presence.
I think
I don't
my
know.
biggest issue with this card, and to be clear, I think this card's good. Um, it's hard to define how good it is, and especially because it scales so weirdly with your board state and how much mana
Yeah,
you have, and like those numbers, you know, influence each other in weird ways. I think the main issue this has is it's in rock roll colors, and I
also
don't think
true.
it beats rock roll in terms of efficiency when it comes to 6 mana. Here's my board state. Solve it or you're dead. This does have the ability to kill people, just
So
like
like
the
yeah,
same turn. So it's like
haste
more
is
like Leyran Alpha.
yeah.
Um,
It
it
also
puts
has
the
the
same.
ability to copy your board,
Mhm,
which
which
is
is
something that Rockroll
not.
doesn't do, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty hype thing, especially like you have a Archive Guardian amongst a bunch of other ETB creatures, and you
Yeah, I mean,
just
like
do stupid
Clone
things there.
Legion is a 9 mana effect.
I don't know. Maybe
Like,
maybe this is actually better than I'm giving it credit for in a deck like Podlight, where you sometimes just generate 7 mana, and in addition to that, this is a 2 mana spell in your deck, which means you can tutor it up with Ancestral Council,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then the second Ancestral Council that you clone finds you another one for the big brain plays.
also
I
true.
would not
Yeah,
recommend that.
I mean, I don't think you would run 2 of these in Pod Late, but
Cannot recommend.
Yeah, it's like all the calamities are so weird to evaluate because they just look so much worse than they probably are. You know what I mean? Um, just because like you're getting like a lot of the value you're getting is just based on the sheer flexibility.
I kind of
But
agree, but I also think that like I think the calamities do have a face value like whoa if you look at like the 5-star mode. So
I
obviously like
guess, yeah,
mhm. I think that like I agree when we're sitting here and like evaluating them in like a pretty competitive context, but I think that like for most people they're gonna look at it and be like, wow, that last mode is kind of crazy, and it scales well, like goddamn.
yeah,
So,
fair enough.
mhm. And I guess that's more getting into like perception than like actuality. But I think like at a glance, these I think the calamities have like a pretty like wow factor to them.
Oh, they
Yeah.
definitely do. They definitely do. I'm just strictly talking about like when we're trying to evaluate them, for competitive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next up we have a reprint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this card is Restore. It's 1 in green. Sorcery. Put target land card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. I believe we used to have something that was almost identical to this, but we lost in its rotation. In general, this is a card that is a fairly powerful effect. It is similar to a Rampant Growth. With any fetch land in your graveyard, it's very easy to get fetch lands in your graveyard. It also allows you to recur utility lands, which can be particularly notable if you're recurring like a Tectonic Edge type effect.
Yeah, I think if we ever do something on the level of Wasteland, maybe, but like we probably won't.
I
and
hope so.
uh, besides that, I don't really see it.
Yeah, it's fair.
I don't know. Like, it's
Maybe I should
fine.
just be happy playing Kamahueto Calf. Call that a
Yeah,
day.
I love Kamohito Staff.
I think
I'd
like
rather just for me, I'd rather just cast Farseek.
Yeah.
if there's some reason that you want a non-creature, uh, then I can see this. Otherwise, like a non-creature like land recursion. Otherwise, yeah, Kamahoe to Calf, Sangjin. I think they all have niches that kind of outweigh this one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and for our last green card, we have Yilda the Wild Soul. So 1 green for a 1/1 with Vigilance, but the real sauce is that you can have them permanent, or you can have her permanently become a copy of another creature you control by paying its mana value plus green, and you can kind of just flip between different creatures. Now, I think that this is like a cool effect. It's expensive, and I'm not sure what you would do with it, but it's kind of just like there is like, hey, this is something new and exciting to brew with. Do you guys have any
So
thoughts off the top of your head?
there's the classic Purging Watchkeeper combo every time something like this comes up, which is like okay, whatever. Besides that, I think like
Wait, what's the
maybe in
Purging Watchkeeper
Legends.
combo
Oh wait,
again?
no, you don't run this in Legends because you can't copy
Wrong
legendary creatures.
Watchkeeper.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, sorry, I meant
Oh,
Frenzy Watchkeeper.
Frenzy Watchkeeper. Okay.
I always get the two mixed up somehow.
No, no,
Yeah.
that's fair. I was just like, I could not think of what you could have meant otherwise, and I was like, fucking,
Yeah.
huh?
The 2 mana 7/7 lifelink. Um, I think that like this is. I don't know. I'm not that high on it actually. Someone tell me.
Yeah. Um.
We were really strapped for green cards, y'all.
I think you guys didn't put my favorite green card.
Oh,
Which
okay.
is
We
the
want.
Confluence.
Oh, it's the boy Ruin Shell Crab. That card's
Oh.
sweet.
Oh, okay. I can drop it in mid review and we can talk about it if you want to gas up your boy Ruin Shell Crab.
I
I'll
don't.
just say I like Ruin Shell Crab. It doesn't like it, I guess, which is why it's not on the list.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Anyway.
I don't know. This is a card that feels like it could do neat things, but like as we're talking, I can't think of a single one of them, so that's not a great sign.
I think it's just kind of mana intensive and a bit slow.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like opportunity cost, like what are you cutting to run this in the decks that you want to play it in,
Very true.
But it's cool. maybe if you have like a Phyrexian Dreadnought type thing, but the problem is you can't use it in.
Activate is only a sorcery. Yeah, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's whatever. Okay.
And next up, onto
Next
the
up we have
multicolored cards.
yeah,
And yeah,
so
this is a very
Enraged
Dodger
Fire,
card. So talk
Enraged
about it.
Fangworm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's Lotus Cobra's Angry Dad. Um, it is a 4-mana 4/2, and it has Lotus Cobra's effect. So whenever you hit landfall, you get a mana. And you can also sacrifice land whenever you want to hit a player for 1 damage. You can only use it once each turn. I don't know. I know I'm the green red lands guy. I think this card's fine. 4 mana is a lot, like to invest into a Lotus Cobra because um, even though like it's got better stats, sure, but you don't really care as much about the stats. The fact that this can make lands hit your graveyard whenever you want might be useful. So like, if you have a land with a spicy death trigger, or you care about like having lots of lands in your yard, or you have an effect that triggers. Like maybe you can use this with like Prismite Purveyor, but you can only use it once each turn. Actually, I don't know. I'm pretty low on this card to be honest.
Yeah, I don't have much to gas it up.
I guess it's
Kind of
not a
neat
good
with
time
Chris
when
Might Vault.
I'm low on it.
Yeah, kind of neat with Chris Might Vault.
Yeah, you
Like,
see, it has
okay,
green
so
in
this
its cost, so we obviously cannot be very high on it.
so this card it does 2 damage to your opponent every turn cycle, right? If you're like for the purposes of like Hazret style finish them off, right? And you
Yeah,
don't need to invest any more mana into it to do that.
true.
And you know it's got 4 power, so it's low. Like if you draw it later in the game, it can ramp you like Lotus Cover does, while also just providing a bigger impact or trading with something bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't think that like the effectiveness of the landfall effect is severely diminished with the mana cost increase to 4. So yeah,
Sure.
I don't have high hopes for this card. Like if I'm playing a land deck and I have the choice between running this as a 4-drop or Into the Unknown, like
It's over.
pretty hard to make an argument for this, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've been on kind of a negative streak, but I think the next one is pretty hype.
This
It's
next card's pretty good.
it's Riddle Eater. Blue and a black for at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and either investigate or sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. So
Yeah, it's got
we
2/2 stats.
and yeah, we do love our Bob variants in just custom Magic in general. And this is a pretty neat Bob variant where you can either draw a card every other turn cycle or just keep hoarding up clues and be like, yeah, I'll just manually spend my mana on them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really like this for Esper Theocracy, because it can single-handedly fulfill your civilized requirements, and it can
Oh
also
wait, I didn't realize that because it's an
it
enchantment. That's really filthy.
yeah, mhm. And it gets hit off of Rudai Overseer too. So always like increasing your ratio of hits is always nice, and it draws 2 cards. Like those decks often end up with like random, like it lets you crack your clues for free, basically. You can think of it that way. Um, and it generates you a card every other turn if you're just playing it with no synergies in mind. So like even as far as bobs go, it's not the worst. I don't know. Besides that, like that's generally the kind of deck you want to play it in, like the Imperial Confidant style decks.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'll say, really.
What do you think, Pip?
Nah, I mean I'm pretty much in the same boat. I think this card is good in terms of synergy stuff. It's okay in terms of generic value, but I wouldn't like. This doesn't make me think that now a kind of bug or a Grixis just 1-for-1 the mid-range deck can exist. If it is, it's not on the back of this card. Card's fine though.
Okay.
Sweet. All
Next
right.
up,
So next up we have Observer of Eons.
and this is a doozy.
This card's pretty terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
It's an 8 mana 5/5 with trample. It is an enchantment artifact creature. and it costs 1 less to cast for each artifact and/or enchantment you control. So double affinity on a colorless card with 5/5 stats and trample. Very, very good. Like, this is a much, much, much better Mirror Enforcer. It also has an ability: sacrifice a cryptic permanent or exile a cryptic card from your graveyard to give it +1/+1 till end of turn. No mana investment to do that, by the way. So any random artifact or enchantment you have in play, you can sack it, and then you can also exile it from your graveyard to give it another buff.
Yeah, and it
I
also
mean,
has
this just kind of murders people.
and it does
It's not even legendary.
mhm. And it does have trample, so like
Yeah.
you're just it the sacrifice or exile gives me big Machias vibes, except this doesn't have haste, but it makes up for it by you can cost it down real good. It has better starting stats and has that sweet trample. So
Yeah. I
I
mean,
like because you were talking
I think
earlier
I'm
about
probably gonna get one hit KO'd by this card at least once in the next
yeah,
couple months. Is my current
probably.
prediction.
yeah, like
Probably.
you were talking earlier, Dodger, about like I think this card might need a nerf. I think this is my pick for like
We already did nerf it. It was
We
sitting
nerfed
at
it,
7/7.
yeah, and also
but
before submissions, it also got a discount for once in your graveyard. So the card
yeah,
has seen a couple hits.
well, yeah, I think it's probably gonna. I guess I'm saying it will get
Your
further.
guess is more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
fair.
a reasonable prediction. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, there are so many ways to make random artifact tokens and stuff. There's also a ton of cantripping artifacts. The format doesn't really have any free artifacts, so that kind of makes it a little different from the traditional affinity decks of formats past, where you just run like the 8-pack of Memnite and Ornithopter and go nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
but it
so
does
that,
have
that makes it a little
artifact lands. So
yeah.
like,
Well, there's just the one, right? It's just Brine Fleet Bay.
well, the rail lines are functionally artifact lands.
Yeah,
They're
We also have
artifacts that take
enchantment.
land
We
drop.
also have enchantment lands if you want to run
That's true. Zealot. Zealot
Zealot.
is like actually a good card.
Yeah,
yeah,
And then there's Dreamscape, but that's more of a meme.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like,
I,
this
I
card, this
think
card
this
is
card's.
clearly very strong.
I can see this card coming down turn 3 in some of the nuts starts out of the artifact decks. And I think this is a very difficult card to handle if it's sitting there while backed up by a bunch of other 1/1s, since the typical
Yeah,
ways you answer single targets in MSEM don't scale up versus 5/5s or 8 CMC things. So
I feel
I don't know.
what may happen is if this card starts, like, if this kind of deck starts becoming really strong, maybe you should just start running some wilts
Yep.
in your main deck, and it's just like, hey, I have this card where if they try to all in me, I just wilt it, and then against
Admonish.
matches where it doesn't matter, I'll just cycle it. Yay!
Admonish is also in there.
Admonish works too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, this card's obviously very good.
The next card is one I'm also very interested in, which is Hala Isin, Makatali's Opus. So 1 mana for legendary artifact Clue. So it has the Clue ability, and also has whenever you cast a spell with a bullet point in its text, you may pay 2 any number of times. For each time you do copy that spell, you may choose new targets and select modes for the copy. So the main thing is the cost to do this once is pretty low. It is card advantage at a very affordable cost. The main issue is it's kind of hard to take proper advantage of doing that because, you know, good charms are like 3 mana or 2 mana. So we're looking at you have to have 4 mana open to do the thing here.
It kind
So
of
that
has
kind of
the same
sucks.
issue as Decisive Arcanist.
Yeah,
but-
and splitting image to a lesser extent.
Yeah, so like I think this card I'm actually more hopeful for it than Decisive Arcanist, because this does it does like Myrari like things at a very, very cheap rate. Like, not only does it cost 1/5 of what Myrari costs, but like it costs less to copy a thing, and you can do it any number of times. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and the only drawback is that there's a select pool of things that you can do, right?
And also
Or
that
things
like modal
like
spells in general tend to
yeah,
cost like a little bit more by virtue of their flexibility. Like we've obviously seen some nice cheap ones in this review alone, but I think like
yeah.
the real juicy ones that have like options that you all like.
So I think what you do with this is you find a moto spell that you would be willing to Myrari, and then
Mhm.
you just Myrari it for very cheap,
For
right?
sure. Hmm.
Like maybe I think there's a card that ends the turn and draws 7, in this set,
Yeah.
or ends the turn or draws 7.
Hmm.
So you can use this as like a kicker to that. You can
I mean that
this
is
card can
also like
copy.
7 mana, and if you have 9 mana, I feel like.
True. Yeah.
Mhm.
You can also copy Kraken Time, which again a lot of mana, but uh,
But you kind of win the game if you do it.
no, but at
Mhm.
the same time, like this is a
And
one
also
mana
one of the
Myrari.
decks,
Like
and one of the decks that's cracking in time. A wants artifacts, and B is casting crack in time without paying its mana cost. So I feel like in the kind of under the sea deck where you're able to go, you have this in play, you have under the sea in play. If you pass your opponent after you've untapped once, you could copy crack in time like 5 times and kill them on the spot.
yeah, that's sort of win more because oftentimes you've cast Kraken Time once, you kill them on the spot.
Mhm.
But
That's true.
um,
I've seen that deck lose like once when it has cast crack in time. But
yeah,
this this really makes sure you don't lose.
it's
Mhm.
So
also it, it can cantrip too, which is not nothing. It's a one man
yep.
artifact, so if this is part of your combo kill, you can Odelia for it. Um,
Ooh, Dodger be plugging
like
Odelia for sure.
I don't
But
have to plug Odelia. People have been abusing Odelia.
hmm
like
no, I don't even mean that in a
yeah,
bad way. Just like I think,
I know. Well,
yeah,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Odelia is a good card. I think.
hmm yeah. I
I
think
think
like
that like
it's just been limited by the amount of stuff you can grab. And this set is like, would you like one more? Would you like another? Oh, okay. How about
yeah,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah. I mean, it's a card that will continue to get better with the card pool.
Hmm. And speaking of that, I
And
think that's only true of Palyson as well. As we get more and more modal spells, its stock will
agreed.
go up.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Next up. Oh, this is my favorite card in the set actually.
Really? Okay, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, I
Okay,
love this card.
hit us.
So it's Restored Automaton. It is an endless one artifact creature, so it's just X for an XX, or it's a 0/0, but it comes in with X 1/1 counters, and it has Mentor. Um, so this thing is actually kind of brutal. For like specifically artifact centric aggro decks. Like I think this card would be a pretty good inclusion in the old shops. I mean, shops is kind of dead now that it got nerfed, but like it's not that hard to imagine like a scenario where like even in mono green counters, this card isn't bad. Like you can drop it as a 3/3 if you ever have Katie in play. It suddenly gets bigger. And like once you invest a good amount of mana into it, like Endless One is already a pretty solid card. Um, and just having Mentor is really valuable on something that you can make as big as you want with a lot of mana. So um, it's not like Kelly Shop is terrible. Like it's still a soul land. So I don't know. I'm not sure that this card is insane in MSEM, but I think it would be insane in like the Hardened Scales aggro decks, for instance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if we get similar support, then this card could pop off a lot. And I don't know. I don't even necessarily think this card's great in MCM, but I just really love this design.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
So the next card is a very, very, very dirtily blue land, so I feel obligated to talk about it. It is Alrotha, Pearl of the Sand Sea. Um, you can have it enter the battlefield tapped. If you don't, an opponent investigates. Taps that blue, and it has 1 blue tap investigate. So this functionally has 4 mana tap draw card, which, or 5 mana if you count itself, which is pretty good, especially because you can bank the mana really easily. You have 3 mana one turn, so you investigate, then you have 2 mana the next turn, so you draw a card. The fact it taps for blue is a pretty notable upside over Nareba. I can't think of any matchups where I want it to come in untapped, which is a little bit unfortunate. Um, because versus combo, you don't want to give them more cards. Versus aggro, you don't want to give them more cards. And versus control, in the control mirror, you also don't want to give them more cards.
Hmm.
It's
But
a good
So
I think
combo deck.
like this would be totally fine even if it entered tapped all the time. And
yeah,
And I think that
So
having
that's
this sometimes, like, if you're gonna just kill them that
I
turn and
just
you need that one extra mana, it's like, yeah, okay,
I just
cool.
can't picture it, but hey, maybe it'll happen. I'm sure someone's gonna do something funny in EDH with Quillia. Is my current prediction. Um,
Funny. Yeah, like I think this card's uh actually fairly low opportunity cost. Um, I always really like utility lands that like often don't actually even slow down your curve. Like I think the castle from Eldraine, the
Mhm.
castle like from Eldraine are all very good. Um, and this is a cool. I actually would have liked to see this card be a full cycle personally. I was a bit disappointed when there was only one, but um, this card, like as is, I feel like it's good. It's like a fairly free one of inclusion in decks where you expect to activate it. Um, especially if you're a deck that like plays a tempo style and like maybe kills them quickly enough that the clue usually won't matter, but like this gives you a mana sink in games that happen to go long.
Mhm.
mhm.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not convinced, but
I mean, it's just kind of
it's
filthy. It's a pretty good rate to investigate at. So
yeah.
I think that, like, yeah, it's just a good utility land. And if it was, it would be even filthier if it had an island type instead of a desert, but it
Yeah, that'd
doesn't. So,
be. Or if we could
Yeah,
still fetch deserts.
hmm
yeah. Like I think it's you don't always have the room to fit this in. It's got a lot of competition, but tapping for blue means that it does have reasons to run it over a lot of these like colorless utility lands. So
hmm
that's always something to consider.
for sure. Okay. Next up is collapsing ridges. And speaking of utility lands, you can tap it to pay for colorless, but you can also use it as a pain land for black. And then you can pay 6 plus tapping this, so essentially 7 mana, and use it as just, creature reanimation. Um, I will say okay, from playing Reanimator in Revolution, there's a land there which does this, but essentially repeatable, and that thing is goddamn insane. I think that even in MSEM, being able to do it just once in games that go long is well, like, quite well good enough on its own. Thank you very much. Like,
Especially because 6 and 7 mana is like a pretty relevant breakpoint.
for sure, for sure. Um, or I guess 7 versus 8 because because
Yeah.
tapping. Um, and it's like it's just such an easy like backup plan where it's like if you're in a matchup where like you're trading just your reanimation spells against their interaction, you can be like, oh, okay, you either can't interact with this, or the game's going long and I'm just gonna get this off, even if you somehow like even if this was another reanimation spell, it's just like they might just not have the interaction for it. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm just getting something back and I kill you then.
I also think in general, people need to just learn to play more utility lands in their MSEM decks. The number of times I see people just lose games because they didn't draw enough lands because they refused to put lands in their deck is really high. And I think lands like Collapsing Ridges are really good for mid range decks because they are lands you can run that also mean you can't really flood out because even when you've drawn 7 lands, which is a ridiculous number of lands, now you just, reanimate your Evaldi's Muse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the life payment will hurt. Like, it's not a zero cost inclusion, but it's really not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Okay.
Last one. Is this the last card?
Yep. This is the
Yep.
last card of our review.
Cool. So this is a card that is fairly similar to a card that was banned in Standard. Uh, it is Path of Fire, um, and the card I'm referencing is Ramanop Ruins. This one is 5 mana to activate, and it does 3 damage to target player Planeswalker instead of just 2. Of course, you can't sacrifice any desert, so that's a very big difference. But like basically, this feels like a pretty free include for burn. Um, that also gives you some additional reach in the late game.
So, I don't think it's super free especially because of how Burns like just one drop suite and Burn suite works.
Yeah.
They do actually cost themselves a bunch of life, and in a format that is as aggro heavy as MSEM is, I think that is a non-zero cost. I think putting another lane in your deck that deals you damage every time you tap it is pretty rough. Especially because I don't think you can realistically expect to tap it for colorless in most Burn games, because Burn is all like 1 mana value cards that have red in their cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
I
wouldn't say jam 4, but like I feel like 1 or 2
I think
is
it's
safe.
I think it's better than the investigate lands, and people run those. I would say just replace your investigate lands with this.
Yeah, I hate
Is where I'm at.
to be honest.
Yeah.
um,
I don't know. Maybe I'm underestimating how hard it is to get to 6 lands versus get to 4 lands. But I feel like this has to be better than
I
those.
feel like the nice thing about this is like oftentimes, your win condition against Burn is like hope they brick, and if they're at 5 lands, they literally can't brick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they literally can't.
But yeah.
Alrighty.
And with that, that is the end of the Riddles of Revio review. So thanks everyone for watching and listening. And I say this every review, but Plane Sculptor's link and Instigator links are in the description. Check out the full set. It's fantastic, and this is a very limited look at the relevant cards for a single constructed format. As we mentioned before, the set's limited, is incredibly deep and so much fun. So I would, yeah, as always, check out the entire set. And oh yeah, speaking of limited, we will be actually, I believe, hosting limited events of both Arcadai and Riddles of Revio in the coming weeks.
Arcadai's happening next week.
For sure. So yeah, so hop in the Discord server, linked in the description, and you can play with these sets both in constructed and limited. And I don't think I have anything else to say. Do you guys have anything?
Nope.
Okay.
Nah.
Okay, in that case, thanks all for watching, and see you next time when we either do a flashback review or next season, whichever comes first. See ya.